the tabloid stunner that closed the week and is now, take a look here, the subject of front-page headlines across America. President, secret recording, payoff, and playmate are words one does not expect to find in the same sentence. But that is where we find ourselves this Sunday, and there are giant legal and political questions as a result. Your favorite president did nothing wrong was part of a presidential tweet Saturday, a tweet that made clear the president's anger at both his longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen, and the authorities who seized this and other recordings during a raid on Cohen's home and his office. Inconceivable is the term the president used for the raid and the brash Cohen decision to record him. Now, Cohen isn't talking, but his lawyer tweeted that it would be wrong to believe what the president is saying about this, ending the tweet with this taunt. Why so angry? Quick context, that recording was made at Trump Tower 2 months before the 2016 presidential election. Cohen, we are told, suggests paying Playboy model Karen McDougal to buy the rights to her story, which is that she had a months-long affair with then businessman Trump back in 2006. A source tells CNN the president asked Cohen how such an arrangement would work. The president in the past has denied the affair and denied any knowledge of payments to McDougal. And you start there. What has been said on the president's behalf about this in the past, some of it clearly not true. The question is, what is the legal jeopardy for Mr. Cohen and the president now?
Yeah, and that's one of the big questions going forward, whether or not any of this involves a violation of federal law, campaign finance law, perhaps anything even more significant, implicating the president, whether or not Michael Cohen is going to cooperate with federal authorities against the president, among other issues. Clearly, the president is concerned. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tweeted like he did yesterday, suggesting that Michael Cohen may have done something illegal, even though it's not illegal to record a conversation one way under New York law. But, you know, there's the legal side, and there's also the political side. The president in the campaign was dishonest and, frankly, lied to the American public about his relationship with Karen McDougal. Now we know from this tape recording, obviously, that it existed. They said there was no such relationship before. This comes the same way that they completely denied the Stormy Daniels situation. The president said he had no knowledge, knew nothing about this payment. Rudy Giuliani said, well, he did know about this payment. He was involved with it. So clearly there are a lot of questions at the White House.
And all happening at roughly the same time frame. The last couple of months of the presidential election, the payment to Stormy Daniels, the payment, the National Enquirer ended up making the payment. And this conversation was, should they essentially buy the rights away from the National Enquirer to silence her? I'm sorry, I interrupted.
When you do reporting in Trump world, you often find that people are perpetually concerned about Michael Cohen. He's Trump's New York lawyer, thought he was going to come in the White House. Early on, he was down in Washington some. White House aides and Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, others said, you know, this guy doesn't need to be in here all the time. I mean, he was the president's kind of bagman and fixer in New York. And the folks in Washington do not know what this guy knows, what documents he possessed, how many conversations he taped, how he behaved for decades, or at least 1 decade and more as the president's lawyer. And if you talk to people around the president, you often hear concern about Michael Cohen. And you can see from the president's tweet this weekend, he's now concerned about Michael Cohen. I mean, this is someone who, when Cohen has told associates that he doesn't feel the president's been loyal enough to him, he's complaining about his legal bills. He's not someone who's really in the president's corner anymore. When you have someone who is your top fixer, I think is the right word, who's no longer in your corner, it's not good for you.
Also, the whole point of a fixer, as I understood it, not having one myself, unfortunately, is that the fixer fixes things without the principal knowing. And that was certainly what we heard from some Republicans, some people around Trump, was that the president didn't necessarily know what Cohen was doing. This tape blows that up. He's speaking to him about this matter on a tape. So that really that blows up any sort of plausible deniability. The president knew what was going on. He was involved. And I think that's a big problem, especially considering, as you rightfully point out, nobody knows what other tapes exist, what they're about, or what's coming at all. But I would imagine that they're likely going to be conversations with the president. And that seems pretty problematic for the White House. And
the president is, I'm sorry, you want to?
So this incident to me in isolation is difficult for me to get excited about or get into a lather about. It seems unsurprising to me. We knew during the campaign that the president was dishonest. We knew that he was a philanderer. We knew that he surrounded himself with people like Michael Cohen who did these sorts of things. The president's response also seems typical to me. It doesn't necessarily signal concern to me. It signals that he's thin-skinned, that this guy is getting under his skin. What strikes me is the possibility of what does this guy have on him in the future, and is there something bigger than this incident that exists? Because this to me doesn't seem like anything all that significant.
The question becomes, is there some either campaign finance or banking record violation in terms of how the money was moved around? That would be the question going forward. The president is mad. He's up in Bedminster, New Jersey at his resort for the weekend. You saw the tweets yesterday. He's also trying to change the subject, as he often does, tweeting about other things, including last night the rigged witch hunt. This morning he's at it again, but last night it was headed by the 13 angry Democrats. No collusion, no obstruction. The president going on there. It's interesting. You know, I know from conversations he's had with friends that he's mad at Michael Cohen. He's used some choice words in describing his longtime friend and fixer. He's trying to do this now again. But just for a little context, again, the president lashing out. He calls it the witch hunt. He calls it rigged. This is the president's own FBI director speaking publicly again this week, saying, sorry, boss, it's not the way I see it.
I do not believe Special Counsel Mueller is on a witch hunt. I think it's a professional investigation conducted by a man that I've known to be a straight shooter. In all my interactions with him in my past life in government and certainly since then. So I don't think it's a witch hunt.
How does that play with the boss when these guys repeatedly get asked about this at a time where you see the stories in the newspaper again today, releasing of the documents in the Carter Page FISA warrant? The president says they show one thing. If you read the documents, they actually don't show what the president says they show at all. But you can sense a tension as we get more activity out of the special counsel's office, tension in the White House.
Well, the president's rhetoric on the investigation puts folks like Christopher Wray in a tough spot because he has, tens of thousands of agents and law enforcement officials that he's responsible for who obviously don't see it as a witch hunt. And the president, but he can't really publicly, sharply disagree with the president either because the president can fire him. I mean, there you saw him trying to walk the line without repudiating the president, but just saying, here's what I think the facts are, right? I mean, the president's messaging exercise on this probe, I think, is actually been pretty successful. He has lots of people convinced that it is a witch hunt. You've seen approval numbers go down for Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe. There's been all sorts of incendiary charges, some of them not true, obviously, about this investigation. And then you have folks who are playing it out, Rod Rosenstein, Christopher Wray, obviously Bob Mueller, who are in a tough spot because he's a president of the United States. And when he tweets these sorts of things, it's hard to go against the guy who paid your check or who keeps you in office.
And the risk in doing that, too, of course, is that he does not put any pressure on Russia for allegedly, these Russians who were indicted for hacking and attacking the American elections. The president has still not called for their extradition. He still has not raised any concerns about what was found 8 days ago by these indictments. Instead, he's been continuing to attack this as a rigged witch hunt to suffice to help his own political purposes.
But as Josh points out, it is kind of smart PR because in the end, particularly if Democrats win the House, this is likely to be a political process. If Democrats win the House and they decide to pursue some kind of impeachment action, which is certainly what the grassroots of their base and the liberal wing of their base wants them to do, it becomes a political game in Washington. So laying out the president's narrative now is setting up for that moment. The thing is, there's been no counter narrative because the investigation, Robert Mueller has been a black box. So the question is, what happens once we start hearing from Mueller, once the investigation starts speaking? Then there's pushback to that narrative. And does the dynamics of that, do those polling numbers start to shift?
Are we having the same conversation at the end of September that we're having now as we watch what plays out in Mueller in the next few weeks? I think it's a big question.